My name is David Hume Kennerly, and I'm a photographer. People want longer titles, but I don't, so. I photographed 11 presidents over my career. Only one of them was already out of office, and that was Lyndon Johnson. All the others had been in office. And my approach to presidents is like my approach to anybody else. I mean, they are human beings, even though we don't always think that. I try to be myself, and sometimes you're behind a rope and you're taking pictures, so there's no interaction. That happens a lot. In the case of President Ford, I was his chief White House photographer, so I was there all the time, and that was a personal relationship. I've basically, except for one whom I don't like very much, gotten along with all of them. And I'm not even going to say who that is. When I was 19 years old, I photographed Robert Kennedy, who came to my hometown of Portland, Oregon. I was a newspaper photographer, and there were so many people who came out to see him in this very crowded room, and I couldn't get into the room. And there was a Life magazine photographer there traveling with him who helped me get in and put me in a place. And I got the picture. And then afterwards, they went to the airport. And I watched Kennedy get up on his plane. And then this photographer went in after him, and the door closed, and the plane took off. And that was the moment I decided I wanted to be a political photographer. I wanted to be on the plane with those people, the people who make the world go around, make big decisions. I wanted to be part of that. When I was in Vietnam, I got a telex. They don't do that anymore. Like a message on the wire, and saying that I'd won a Pulitzer Prize. And I was shocked because I didn't know that I'd been entered for it. I mean, most people know they enter. I had nothing to do with it, other than taking the photos, obviously. I didn't know how to deal with that. That was something that I didn't even really dream of that. It seemed so remote that would happen. I really think how I handled it was that the next day, I went out in the field in Vietnam with a friend of mine. We almost got killed in a battle. And all I could think about was like, how stupid am I? I win a Pulitzer Prize, then I go out and get killed, and all my colleagues are going to think I'm so, like, what an idiot, you know? But it affected my life to the degree that probably opened some doors, but my answer to it was really to keep on doing what I was doing. It's all I could do. I do think it led to a job with Life magazine, which was a really important magazine as a photography magazine. And so they hired me, and then I turned out to be the last photographer they hired. They went out of business a month after they hired me, which is another shock, and not a good shock. But then I went on to Time magazine, and my career kept moving. Being in Vietnam was a real challenge because I spent a lot of time out in the jungles with the troops, both Americans and then more with Vietnamese after the American involvement wound down. It was challenging to stay alive. I mean, that was the first challenge. And then taking pictures under adverse circumstances. And I wasn't heroic about it. I mean, it was like frightening. You make decisions in your life about what you want to do. And I felt that this is important to do. And I'd had 4 of my classmates from high school were killed in Vietnam. And I had been the high school newspaper photographer and the annual. And to me, it was kind of an extension of what I was doing as a senior at Westland High School in Oregon, that I had to carry on. I was doing it for them. I was doing it because it was a big news story. And my choice of a career was to be a news photographer, essentially, with an emphasis on politics. As far as ethically, I think it's important to cover wars. I wrote an editorial for the New York Times a few months ago about Ukraine war photography and how difficult it is to look at the the product of these photographers' work, which is people suffering. But I said it's important not to be desensitized to this, and not to be laissez-faire about it. And so photographers are showing you pictures of things you don't want to see sometimes, and that's our job. And a lot of photographers get killed in the process of doing that. Ethically speaking, I mean, there have been occasions where I haven't shot a picture of somebody if they didn't want their picture taken. Generally, almost everybody I would deal with wanted the world to see what was happening to them, villagers in Vietnam or any place I was photographing. They say, show this, tell the world what's happening. The way media has changed has been more about technology than anything. The basic concept of what we do as like war photographers or any kind of photographer hasn't changed. The distribution of it's changed. Like everybody can have their camera phone, iPhone or whatever. So you get a lot of things that you wouldn't have seen before. The most important thing are the professional photographers who work for the wire services or newspapers, that they have a professional ethical obligation to show the truth. And so I think that if you're seeing photographs from a trusted source, at least you get a good sense of the reality of it, or the truth of it, really. But the way I see it through a digital camera, or the way I saw it through like a film camera, it's no different. My vision doesn't change because of technology, but the way it gets out to the world, obviously it changes, but the product is the same. It wasn't the paycheck. I mean, what kept me going was, and I could have left at any time, and I chose not to leave until I'd been there for 2 years. And quite frankly, the story of the United States with Watergate and all of that was overwhelming the story of what was happening in the war for me. But I didn't leave because I was afraid. A lot of people, they say, okay, I've had enough. And I really respect that. I mean, it's a difficult job, physically and mentally and all that. I stayed there as long as I thought that the story was worth covering for me. Wasn't that the story went away and then war ended, America left in disarray. And I really stayed up until a bigger story got my attention. Everything can be taught except how to see. I really mean that about the eye of the professional photographer. I mean, you look around here, you could say, well, you were in the room with President Ford at Akasaka Palace, or like normal people can't get there with the 5 presidents at the Reagan Library opening. The professional photographers get paid for the way they see things. In terms of technically and all that, I mean, we all have a proficiency, and I'm not one of the great technical photographers, but it's about the moment, capturing the moment. You can't teach somebody how to do that. I mean, it's an evolutionary thing, and I don't think you're genetically a photographer or maybe a football player. I don't know, that would be more likely, actually. It's really in your mind. And I can tell people how to use the camera and, like, you know, the f-stops, or not even that anymore, really. But I can't tell you how to look at something and then make a picture out of it. Well, a lot of what I'm photographing would be history in the making, would be a dramatic moment, like Muhammad Ali getting knocked down in midair. That was one of my Pulitzer pictures. And that's part skill, part luck, certainly, because everybody else missed the shot. An impactful image could be like that. It could be a big news or a moment of a decisive moment, as Cartier-Bresson would have said. It could be the portrait of Bill Clinton when he's listening to survivors of a plane crash. And you can see in his face that there's something more going on. Portraits that reveal somebody's character. I'm really into photography for the history. And so the legacy of what I've done is that I've captured moments nobody else got and will give you a better understanding 50 years from now what it was like. And like, who were these people, and having some insight into the people I photographed. And that's not just me doing it, but anybody in my business. I think that's the most important part of it, actually, that you'll be able to look at these pictures long after I'm gone and get some understanding of what was happening at the time. This is not my first time to Sharjah. I was here in 1977, and all I can tell you, it's changed a lot. And I was here about 10 years ago, briefly. I got some really good pictures of the mosque. It's a nice one. I love mosques, the architecture. They're not all the same, certainly. I love hearing the call to prayer. No, this is a great place. I'm really glad I came. My advice to young people wanting to take pictures has always been do it. But you've got to get out there and look at things. And I think you can't just think about it, you have to do it. I mean, I've been driven to do this. You want to know my favorite color?